Behind the golden gates of Windmere Palace, where protocol rules every breath and silence speaks louder than words, a single moment of raw emotion shattered decades of careful composure. Queen Consort Elena Whitmore, known for her impeccable grace and diplomatic smile, found herself face to face with her greatest challenge yet. Not a foreign dignitary or political crisis, but an 8-year-old princess whose innocent question would expose the deepest fractures in the royal foundation. What happened in the Rose Garden on that autumn afternoon wasn't just a family disagreement. It was the moment when years of suppressed tension, unspoken resentments, and carefully hidden truths collided with the unstoppable force of childhood honesty. When the palace guard's 9 words echoed across the courtyard, they didn't just break the silence. They broke the very illusion that had held the monarchy together. This is the story of how a little girl's curiosity became a queen's nightmare, and how one conversation changed the course of an entire kingdom forever. The morning mist hung low over Windmere Palace as Queen Consort Elena Whitmore adjusted her pearl necklace for the 3rd time. Her reflection in the ornate mirror revealing the subtle lines of stress that no amount of royal makeup could completely conceal. At 52, Elena had spent the last 15 years perfecting the art of royal composure, transforming herself from a commoner's daughter into the polished wife of King Alexander Whitmore. Yet today, something felt different. The usual rhythm of palace life seemed somehow off balance, like a symphony missing its conductor. Elena's journey to the throne had been anything but conventional. Born Elena Catherine Mills in the small town of Greybridge, she had been working as a museum curator when she first met then Prince Alexander at a cultural exhibition. Their whirlwind romance had captivated the nation, offering a fairy tale narrative that the press and public eagerly embraced. The wedding had been watched by millions, and Elena's transformation from commoner to royal had been documented in countless magazines and newspapers. But fairy tales, Elena had learned, rarely prepared one for the reality of royal life. The constant scrutiny, the rigid protocols, and the weight of representing an entire nation had taken their toll. More challenging still was her relationship with Alexander's daughter from his first marriage, Princess Charlotte Rose Whitmore, now 8 years old and increasingly curious about the world around her. Charlotte's mother, the late Princess Victoria, had died in a tragic car accident when Charlotte was only 3. The entire kingdom had mourned the loss of their beloved princess, and Elena's arrival in their lives 2 years later had been met with mixed reactions. While the public eventually warmed to Elena, Charlotte remained a constant reminder of the woman she could never replace. The young princess was intelligent beyond her years, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to see through all pretense, and a habit of asking questions that made even the most seasoned courtiers uncomfortable. She had inherited her mother's striking beauty and her father's sharp intellect, creating a combination that was both endearing and formidable. Elena's personal assistant, Margaret Thornberry, knocked softly on the door before entering. Margaret had served the royal family for over 30 years, having started as a lady's maid to the late Queen Mother. Her loyalty was unquestionable, but Elena sometimes wondered if that loyalty extended to her or remained firmly rooted in the memory of Princess Victoria. "Your Majesty," Margaret said with a slight curtsy, "Princess Charlotte is waiting for you in the Rose Garden. She's been asking about the afternoon tea arrangements for her upcoming birthday celebration." Elena nodded, though a small knot formed in her stomach. Charlotte's 9th birthday was approaching, and the event had become a source of tension within the palace walls. The princess had specifically requested a small, intimate celebration, much like the ones her mother used to organize. Elena, however, had been pressured by the royal advisors to host a grand affair that would showcase the monarchy's continued strength and unity. The Rose Garden had been Princess Victoria's favorite place in the entire palace grounds. She had spent countless hours there with Charlotte, teaching her about different flower varieties and sharing stories about their family's history. Elena had initially avoided the space, feeling like an intruder in such a sacred place. But Charlotte often retreated there, when she was upset or contemplative, making it impossible for Elena to ignore completely. As Elena walked through the palace corridors, she passed portraits of generations of royals, their painted eyes seeming to judge her every step. The weight of their legacy pressed down on her shoulders like an invisible crown. She had tried so hard to honor their memory while carving out her own place in the family story, but sometimes it felt like she was walking on a tightrope stretched between the past and the future. The palace staff moved with practiced efficiency around her, their faces maintaining the neutral expressions that years of royal service had perfected. Elena often wondered what they really thought of her, whether they compared her to Princess Victoria behind closed doors, whether they questioned her worthiness to bear the royal title. King Alexander had been understanding but distant lately, consumed by affairs of state and the mounting pressures of his reign. Their marriage, while loving in its way, had become more of a partnership than a romance. They were united in their duty to the crown, but Elena sometimes felt like she was playing a role rather than living her life. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the tall windows as Elena approached the garden entrance. She could hear Charlotte's voice in the distance, talking animatedly to someone. Elena paused for a moment, gathering her composure and preparing herself for another delicate navigation of stepmother-stepdaughter dynamics. The rose garden was in full bloom, a riot of colors that seemed almost too vibrant against the formal backdrop of the palace. Princess Victoria had designed the garden herself, choosing varieties that would bloom in succession throughout the year, ensuring that there would always be something beautiful to see. Elena had to admit it was breathtaking, even as it reminded her of her predecessor's talents. Charlotte was sitting on a small stone bench near the center of the garden, her governess, Miss Abernathy, seated nearby with a book in her lap. The princess was wearing a simple blue dress that brought out the color of her eyes, her blonde hair pulled back with a ribbon that was already coming loose. She looked so much like her mother in that moment that Elena felt a familiar pang of inadequacy. Miss Abernathy rose when she saw Elena approaching, offering a respectful nod. "Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte has been asking about the birthday arrangements. I thought it best if you discussed them directly with her." Elena smiled, though it felt forced. "Of course. Thank you, Miss Abernathy. Perhaps you could give us a few moments alone?" The governess gathered her things and retreated to a respectful distance, though still within sight, as protocol demanded. Elena settled onto the bench beside Charlotte, careful to maintain the proper posture that had been drilled into her during her royal training. "Hello, Charlotte," Elena said gently. "I understand you wanted to discuss your birthday celebration." Charlotte looked up at her with those penetrating blue eyes, and Elena felt the familiar sensation of being studied and evaluated. The princess had a way of looking at people that made them feel transparent, as if she could see all their secrets and motivations. "I was thinking about what Mother would have wanted," Charlotte said quietly, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed far beyond her 8 years. She always said that the best celebrations were the ones where everyone felt truly welcome, not just the ones that looked impressive in photographs. Elena felt her chest tighten. Even in death, Princess Victoria's influence permeated every aspect of their lives. "Your mother was a very wise woman," Elena replied carefully. "But we also have to consider what's best for the monarchy and the people who look up to us." Charlotte tilted her head, studying Elena with renewed intensity. "Do you think Mother would have approved of you marrying Father?" The question hit Elena like a physical blow. It was the kind of innocent inquiry that only a child could pose, yet it struck at the heart of Elena's deepest insecurities. She had spent years wondering the same thing, imagining conversations with the woman whose place she had taken, whose memory she could never escape. "I think," Elena said slowly, choosing her words with extreme care, "that your mother would have wanted your father to be happy and the kingdom to be strong. But do you think she would have liked you?" Charlotte pressed, her voice still innocent, but her eyes sharp with curiosity. Elena felt her carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. The question was so direct, so cutting, that it bypassed all her royal training and struck at the vulnerable woman beneath the crown. Years of suppressed doubt and insecurity began to bubble to the surface. Charlotte, that's not really an appropriate question to. I think she would have been sad, Charlotte continued, seemingly oblivious to Elena's discomfort. Not because you're bad, but because it would mean father had forgotten about her. Sometimes I worry that everyone will forget about her, and then it will be like she never existed at all. The words hung in the air like a challenge, and Elena felt something inside her snap. All the pressure, all the comparisons, all the careful politeness and diplomatic responses suddenly felt unbearable. Here was this child, this constant reminder of her predecessor, questioning her very existence in their lives. Do you think I don't know that? Elena's voice came out sharper than she intended, causing Charlotte to look up in surprise. Do you think I don't feel her presence everywhere I go? In every room, in every conversation, in every look from the staff. Charlotte's eyes widened, clearly startled by Elena's tone. The princess had never seen her stepmother display such raw emotion, and it seemed to frighten her more than any raised voice could have. Elena realized she was trembling, years of suppressed frustration finally finding their voice. I've tried so hard to be worthy of this family, to honor your mother's memory while still being myself. But nothing I do is ever enough, is it? I'll always be the second choice, the replacement, the woman who married your father too soon. The garden fell silent, except for the gentle buzzing of bees among the roses. Charlotte stared at Elena with a mixture of confusion and alarm, clearly unprepared for such an emotional outburst. In the distance, Miss Abernathy had risen from her seat, sensing that something was amiss, but uncertain whether to intervene. Elena immediately regretted her words. She had broken every rule of royal conduct, had shown weakness and vulnerability in front of a child who needed stability and strength. The weight of her failure pressed down on her as she watched Charlotte's face crumple with hurt and confusion. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered, reaching out tentatively toward Charlotte. "I shouldn't have," but Charlotte was already standing, backing away from Elena with tears beginning to form in her eyes. "You're right," the little girl said quietly. "Mother never would have gotten angry like that. She never would have made me feel bad for missing her." Before Elena could respond, Charlotte turned and ran from the garden, her footsteps echoing on the stone pathways as she disappeared around a corner. Elena sat alone among the roses, surrounded by the beauty that Princess Victoria had created, feeling like she had just destroyed something precious and irreplaceable. Part 2. The sound of Charlotte's retreating footsteps echoed in Elena's mind long after they had faded into silence. She remained on the stone bench, surrounded by Princess Victoria's roses, feeling the weight of her failure settling over her like a lead blanket. The afternoon sun continued to shine. The bees continued their work among the flowers, but something fundamental had shifted in the carefully maintained balance of palace life. Miss Abernathy approached cautiously, her experienced eye taking in Elena's distressed state and the absence of the princess. "Your Majesty, shall I go after Princess Charlotte?" Elena shook her head, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She needed time to process what had just happened, to understand how years of careful restraint had crumbled in a matter of moments. The governess lingered uncertainly before quietly retreating, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the overwhelming scent of roses. 20 minutes later, Elena finally gathered herself enough to return to the palace. Her personal assistant, Margaret, was waiting in her private sitting room with an expression that suggested news had already begun to spread through the palace's invisible network of servants and staff. "Your Majesty," Margaret began carefully, "Princess Charlotte is asked to take her afternoon tea in her private chambers. She specifically requested that she not be disturbed." Elena sank into her favorite chair, a piece she had brought from her previous life that looked somewhat out of place among the palace's formal furnishings. "Did she say anything else?" Margaret hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the position she found herself in. "She asked her lady's maid to prepare the blue dress that belonged to her mother." the one from a portrait in the main hall. The significance of this request wasn't lost on Elena. The blue dress was one of Princess Victoria's most iconic garments, worn in the official portrait that hung in the palace's central corridor. Charlotte had worn it only once before, on the anniversary of her mother's death. It was a clear signal that the little girl was seeking comfort in her mother's memory, retreating to the safety of the past when the present had become too painful. Elena's mind raced as she considered the implications of the afternoon's events. Palace life operated on a delicate ecosystem of relationships and reputations. The royal family's strength depended on their ability to present a united front to the world, and any cracks in that facade could have far-reaching consequences. The fact that Charlotte had fled in tears after a confrontation with her stepmother would not go unnoticed by the staff, and from there, news had a way of reaching the outside world. "Margaret," Elena said quietly, "I need to speak with His Majesty as soon as possible." Margaret nodded and moved toward the door, then paused. "Your Majesty, if I may, Princess Charlotte is still very young. Children often say things they don't fully understand, especially when they're missing someone they love." The gentle reminder was both comforting and painful. Elena knew that Margaret was trying to be kind, but it also highlighted the delicate position she occupied in Charlotte's life. She wasn't the child's mother, despite the title she bore, and moments like this made that distinction painfully clear. King Alexander arrived within the hour, his presence commanding even in the informal setting of Elena's sitting room. At 45, he carried himself with a natural authority that came from a lifetime of preparation for the throne. His dark hair was beginning to show traces of silver at the temples, and the weight of royal responsibility had carved subtle lines around his eyes. "Elena," he said, settling into the chair across from her, "Margaret mentioned there was some difficulty with Charlotte this afternoon." Elena recounted the events in the Rose Garden, watching as Alexander's expression grew increasingly concerned. She had always been honest with her husband, but admitting to losing her composure with his daughter felt like confessing to a fundamental failure in her role as queen consort. She was asking about Victoria again, Elena concluded, about whether her mother would have approved of our marriage. I couldn't maintain the diplomatic response anymore. All those years of wondering the same thing myself, and hearing it from her." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled as he processed the information. "Charlotte has been asking similar questions of her tutors and Miss Abernathy," he said finally. "Dr. Morrison believes it's a natural part of her development, trying to understand her place in the family structure and process her grief." Dr. Morrison was the child psychologist who had been working with Charlotte since her mother's death. His involvement had been kept strictly confidential, as the royal family's mental health was considered a private matter that could be exploited by their critics if made public. "What did he recommend?" Elena asked. "Patience, mostly. He said that Charlotte is at an age where she's beginning to understand the complexity of adult relationships. She's trying to reconcile her loyalty to her mother's memory with her growing attachment to you." Elena felt a bitter laugh escape her lips. "Growing attachment? She just told me that her mother would never have gotten angry like I did. That hardly sounds like attachment." "Elena," Alexander said gently, moving to sit beside her, "do you remember what Charlotte was like when we first married? She barely spoke to you, avoided meals when you were present, and threw tantrums whenever you tried to participate in her care." Elena did remember those difficult early days when Charlotte's grief and resentment had created a wall that seemed impossible to breach. The progress they had made since then had been gradual and often fragile, but it had been real. "The fact that she's asking these questions now means she's considering you as a permanent part of her life," Alexander continued. "Children don't worry about their feelings toward people who don't matter to them." "But what if I've damaged that progress today?" Elena asked. "What if I've proven to her that I'm not worthy of being in this family?" Alexander took her hands in his touch warm and reassuring. "You're human, Elena. You're not perfect, and neither was Victoria, despite how Charlotte remembers her. Our daughter needs to learn that even the adults in her life have emotions and vulnerabilities." The use of the word daughter was deliberate and meaningful. Alexander had been careful to refer to Charlotte as our daughter rather than my daughter, whenever possible, emphasizing Elena's role as stepmother and the unity of their family structure. Have you spoken with her? Elena asked. Not yet. I wanted to understand what happened first. But I think we should talk to her together as a united front. She needs to see that our marriage is strong enough to weather these difficult conversations. Elena nodded, though the prospect of facing Charlotte again so soon filled her with anxiety. What if she refuses to see me? What if she's decided that I'm not the person she thought I was? Then we'll work through it together, Alexander said simply. Marriage, parenthood, royal duty, none of it comes with guarantees. We make mistakes, we learn from them, and we move forward. An hour later, they walked together to Charlotte's private chambers. The palace corridors seemed unusually quiet, though Elena suspected that was more a reflection of her heightened awareness than any actual change in the daily routine. Palace staff had an almost supernatural ability to sense tension within the royal family, and she could feel their careful attention even when they weren't visible. Charlotte's lady's maid, Sarah, answered their knock with a curtsy. Your Majesties, Princess Charlotte is at her writing desk. She's been working on correspondence for the past hour. Elena and Alexander exchanged glances. Charlotte had inherited her mother's love of letter writing, and she often retreated to this activity when she was upset or confused. The fact that she had been writing for an hour suggested that she had much on her mind. They found Charlotte seated at a small antique desk that had belonged to Princess Victoria, her blonde hair falling across her face as she concentrated on her writing. She was indeed wearing the blue dress from her mother's portrait, and the resemblance was so striking that Elena felt her breath catch. Charlotte, Alexander said gently. Elena, and I would like to speak with you. The princess looked up, her eyes showing the telltale redness that indicated she had been crying. She glanced briefly at Elena before focusing on her father, and Elena felt a pang at the obvious preference. I was writing to grandmother, Charlotte said quietly, referring to the Queen Mother, who lived in semi-retirement at a country estate. I wanted to ask her about Mother's childhood. Alexander moved to kneel beside Charlotte's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. What specifically did you want to know? I wanted to know if Mother ever got angry, or if she ever said things she didn't mean when she was upset. Charlotte's voice was small, but her words carried deep significance. She was clearly processing Elena's earlier outburst and trying to understand whether such behavior was normal or acceptable. Elena felt her heart clench with a mixture of guilt and hope. The child was giving her an opportunity to redeem herself, offering a path toward understanding and possibly forgiveness. Everyone gets angry sometimes, sweetheart, Alexander said. Even your mother had moments when her emotions got the better of her. Being royal doesn't make us less human. Charlotte looked directly at Elena for the first time since they had entered the room. Were you angry at me, or were you angry about something else? The question was so perceptive that Elena was momentarily speechless. An 8-year-old had cut through all the complex emotions and psychological dynamics to identify the core issue with startling clarity. I was angry about something else, Elena admitted, settling into a chair near the desk. I've been carrying around feelings of sadness and doubt for a long time, and when you asked me those questions, all those feelings came out at once. You didn't deserve to bear the weight of my emotions. What kind of sadness? Charlotte pressed, her curiosity overcoming her wariness. Elena glanced at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. I've been sad because I felt like I could never be good enough to take your mother's place in this family. I've been worried that everyone, including you, would always compare me to her and find me lacking. Charlotte considered this for a moment, her young mind working through concepts that would challenge adults. But you're not supposed to replace Mother. You're supposed to be yourself. The simplicity and wisdom of the statement hit Elena with unexpected force. A child had articulated what months of royal counseling and diplomatic training had failed to convey. She wasn't supposed to become Princess Victoria. She was supposed to be Elena Whitmore, with all her own strengths and flaws. You're absolutely right, Elena said, feeling tears prick at the corners of her eyes. I lost sight of that today, and I'm very sorry for taking my frustration out on you. Charlotte slipped down from her chair and approached Elena hesitantly. I'm sorry, too. I didn't mean to make you feel bad by asking about Mother. I just miss her sometimes, and I get confused about how to feel about everything. Elena opened her arms, and Charlotte stepped into them for the first time in months. The hug was tentative but genuine, and Elena felt something heal inside her chest. We're going to figure this out together, Elena whispered into Charlotte's ear. All of us as a family. Alexander joined the embrace, wrapping his arms around both his wife and daughter. For a moment, the weight of royal duty and public expectation fell away, leaving just three people who cared about each other trying to navigate the complicated landscape of love, loss, and family. Part 3, the weeks following the Rose Garden confrontation, brought an unexpected sense of relief to the palace atmosphere. The honest conversation between Elena, Alexander, and Charlotte had cleared the air in a way that months of careful diplomacy had failed to achieve. However, Elena soon discovered that emotional breakthroughs within the royal family were only the beginning of their challenges. Lord Pemberton, the palace's chief advisor and a man who had served the crown for over 25 years, requested a private meeting with Elena the following Tuesday morning. His weathered face bore the expression of someone carrying unwelcome news, and Elena braced herself for whatever storm was approaching. Your Majesty, Pemberton began, settling into his usual chair in Elena's private study. There have been some concerning developments regarding the incident in the Rose Garden. Elena felt her stomach drop. Despite their efforts to keep the confrontation private, she had suspected that word might leak beyond the palace walls. The royal family lived under constant scrutiny, and even their most personal moments had a way of becoming public knowledge. What kind of developments? She asked, maintaining her composure despite her growing anxiety. Pemberton opened a leather portfolio and withdrew several newspaper clippings. One of the gardening staff apparently overheard portions of the conversation between you and Princess Charlotte. The information found its way to a journalist at the Royal Tribune. The Royal Tribune was known for its sensationalized coverage of royal affairs, often blowing minor incidents out of proportion for the sake of sales. Elena accepted the clippings with trembling hands, scanning the headlines with mounting horror. Royal stepmother's emotional breakdown frightens young princess, read the largest headline. Below it, a subheading claimed, Palace sources question Queen consort stability under pressure. The article itself was a masterpiece of journalistic manipulation, taking fragments of overheard conversation and weaving them into a narrative that painted Elena as an unstable woman cracking under the pressure of royal life. While technically not containing any outright lies, the piece managed to distort the truth beyond recognition. How much do they actually know? Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Fortunately, their information is limited and largely speculative, Pemberton replied. However, the story is gaining traction in other publications. The palace press office has been fielding calls all morning. Elena set the clippings aside, her mind racing through the potential consequences. A story like this could damage not only her own reputation, but also affect Charlotte and Alexander. The monarchy's strength depended on public confidence, and any suggestion of instability within the royal household could have far-reaching implications. What are our options? She asked. We have several approaches we could take, Pemberton said, consulting his notes. We could issue a formal denial, which might draw more attention to the story. We could arrange for a carefully orchestrated public appearance showing family unity. Or we could wait for the story to die down naturally and focus on positive royal engagements to shift public attention. Elena considered each option carefully. A formal denial would indeed draw more attention and might prompt journalists to dig deeper into palace affairs. A staged public appearance would feel forced and artificial, potentially backfiring if the media sensed they were being manipulated. But Allowing the story to fester without response could be equally damaging. There's another concern, Pemberton continued hesitantly. The Board of Royal Trustees is meeting next week to discuss the annual budget and upcoming royal engagements. Some members have expressed worry about the potential impact of negative publicity on public support for the monarchy. The Board of Royal Trustees was a group of distinguished individuals who advised the royal family on matters of public perception and constitutional duty. Their concerns carried significant weight as they represented the interests of Parliament and the British people. If they were beginning to question Elena's fitness for her role, the situation was more serious than she had initially realized. "Have they requested my presence at the meeting?" Elena asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "They have, Your Majesty. They would like to discuss your perspective on recent events and your plans for maintaining public confidence in the royal family." Elena felt the familiar weight of royal responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she made, every word she spoke, every emotion she displayed was subject to scrutiny and judgment. The moment of honest vulnerability she had shared with Charlotte in the Rose Garden was being twisted into a question of her competence and stability. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Margaret entered with a silver tray bearing tea service and a small stack of correspondence. "Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte is here to see you. She says it's about her birthday celebration." Elena nodded, grateful for the interruption. "Please send her in. And thank you for the tea, Margaret." Charlotte entered the room with her usual purposeful stride, her blonde hair neatly braided and her dress perfectly pressed. At 8 years old, she carried herself with a poise that reminded Elena of Princess Victoria. But there was also something uniquely Charlotte about her presence, a directness and emotional intelligence that was entirely her own. "Good morning, Lord Pemberton," Charlotte said politely before turning to Elena. "Good morning, Elena. I hope I'm not interrupting something important." Elena noticed that Charlotte had dropped the formal "Your Majesty" in favor of using her first name, a small but significant change that suggested growing comfort and intimacy between them. "Not at all, sweetheart. What did you want to discuss about your birthday?" Charlotte settled into the chair beside Elena's desk, her expression serious beyond her years. "I've been thinking about what you said regarding celebrations that look impressive versus ones where everyone feels welcome. I think I have an idea that might satisfy both requirements." Pemberton looked intrigued despite the pressing matters at hand. Princess Charlotte's intelligence and insight had become legendary among the palace staff, and her suggestions were often surprisingly sophisticated. "What did you have in mind?" Elena asked. "I'd like to have 2 celebrations," Charlotte began, her voice gaining confidence as she outlined her plan. "A small, private gathering here at the palace with just family and close friends like Mother used to do. But I'd also like to host a public celebration in Hyde Park where ordinary families can come and enjoy games and entertainment." Elena felt a surge of pride at Charlotte's thoughtfulness. The child had found a way to honor her mother's memory while also fulfilling her royal duties to the public. It was exactly the kind of solution that could demonstrate the family's unity and Elena's positive influence on Charlotte's development. "The public celebration could show people that our family is happy and strong," Charlotte continued, glancing meaningfully at the newspaper clippings on Elena's desk. "Sometimes I hear the staff talking about things they read in the papers, and I think people might be worried about us." The perceptiveness of the comment took both Elena and Pemberton by surprise. Charlotte was clearly aware of the recent negative publicity and had developed this plan, at least in part, as a response to it. The 8-year-old princess had instinctively understood the connection between personal behavior and public perception that lay at the heart of royal duty. "That's a wonderful idea, Charlotte," Elena said warmly. "It shows both wisdom and kindness. Could we plan it together?" Charlotte asked. "I'd like you to help me with the details, especially the parts about making sure everyone feels welcome." Elena felt her eyes well up with tears, but this time they were tears of joy rather than frustration. Charlotte was offering her an opportunity to be a true partner in royal duties, to contribute her own skills and perspective to the family's public role. It was the kind of collaboration she had always hoped for, but never dared to expect. "I would be honored to help you plan it," Elena replied. Pemberton cleared his throat gently. "If I may, Your Majesty, Princess Charlotte's suggestion could indeed address some of our current concerns. A successful public celebration showing family harmony would certainly counter the negative narrative that's been developing. But it can't look staged or calculated," Elena cautioned. "The public is very good at detecting artifice, and any suggestion that we're manipulating the situation could backfire. That's why it should be Charlotte's celebration," Charlotte interjected. "People will believe it's genuine because it's coming from me, and children don't usually lie about whether they're happy." The sophisticated understanding of public perception and media manipulation displayed by an 8-year-old was both impressive and slightly concerning. Elena realized that Charlotte was growing up in a world where the line between private life and public performance was increasingly blurred, and the child was learning to navigate that complexity with remarkable skill. "We'll need to be very careful about the planning process," Elena said, her mind already working through the logistics. "Everything must feel natural and spontaneous, even though it will require extensive coordination and security arrangements." "I can help with that," Charlotte offered. "Miss Abernathy has been teaching me about event planning as part of my royal duties education, and I know what kinds of activities other children would enjoy because I actually am a child." Elena smiled at the simple wisdom of Charlotte's observation. Sometimes the royal family became so focused on protocol and perception that they lost sight of basic human truths. Having Charlotte's authentic perspective would indeed be invaluable. "Very well," Pemberton said, making notes in his portfolio. "I'll work with the Palace Events Office to begin preliminary planning. We'll need to coordinate with the Metropolitan Police for security, the Parks Department for venue arrangements, and the Press Office for media management. And I'll need to prepare for the Board of Trustees meeting," Elena added, feeling more confident now that she had a concrete plan to present. Charlotte's birthday celebration could serve as a demonstration of family unity and my positive contribution to royal duties. "There's one more thing," Charlotte said quietly, her earlier confidence giving way to a more hesitant tone. "I'd like Father to give a speech at the public celebration about Mother and about you and about how families can grow and change while still honoring the people they've lost." The request was both touching and strategically brilliant. Alexander's public acknowledgement of Elena's role in their family, delivered in the context of Charlotte's birthday celebration, would carry tremendous weight with the public. It would also provide a platform for addressing, however indirectly, the recent negative publicity. "Do you think he would be willing to do that?" Elena asked. "I think he would be honored," Charlotte replied with a small smile. "Father loves talking about the people who matter to him, and you matter to him very much." Elena reached over and squeezed Charlotte's hand, feeling a depth of affection for the little girl that went far beyond duty or obligation. "You matter to me very much too, Charlotte, more than you might realize." "I'm beginning to understand that," Charlotte said softly, "and I think Mother would be happy about it. Not sad like I used to worry about, but happy that Father found someone who cares about us both." The conversation marked another breakthrough in their relationship, but Elena also recognized that it was part of a larger transformation within the royal family. They were learning to balance tradition with authenticity, duty with emotion, and public service with private truth. Charlotte's birthday celebration would be their first major test of this new approach, and Elena was determined to make it a success. Part for the morning of Charlotte's birthday celebration dawned crisp and clear, with the kind of brilliant autumn sunshine that seemed to promise good fortune for the day ahead. Hyde Park had been transformed into a wonderland of activities and entertainment, with colorful banners fluttering in the gentle breeze and the sounds of laughter already beginning to fill the air as early arrivals explored the various stations that had been set up across the vast green space. Elena stood at her bedroom window, watching the final preparations taking place in the distance. The past 3 weeks have been a whirlwind of planning, coordination, and careful management of every detail. Working alongside Charlotte had proven to be one of the most rewarding experiences of Elena's royal career, as the young princess demonstrated not only remarkable organizational skills, but also an intuitive understanding of what would make the event meaningful for both the participating families and the watching public. The private celebration had taken place the evening before in the intimate setting of the palace's smaller dining room. It had been exactly what Charlotte had envisioned: warm, personal, and filled with the kind of genuine affection that couldn't be manufactured for public consumption. Alexander had given a beautiful speech about family, love, and the different ways people could honor those they had lost while embracing new relationships. Elena had felt, perhaps for the first time since joining the royal family, that she truly belonged. Now came the public celebration, which would be attended by over 3,000 families and covered by media outlets from around the world. The event had generated tremendous positive attention, with the press focusing on Charlotte's maturity and compassion in planning a celebration that would benefit other children. The negative stories about Elena's breakdown had gradually faded from the headlines, replaced by speculation about the royal family's growing stability and unity. Margaret appeared at Elena's elbow, carrying the final version of the day's schedule. "Your Majesty, the cars will be ready in 30 minutes. Princess Charlotte is already dressed and having her final briefing with Miss Abernathy about the protocol for meeting members of the public." Elena nodded, though she couldn't help but smile at the image of 8-year-old Charlotte receiving protocol briefings. The child had thrown herself into the planning process with such enthusiasm and attention to detail that even the most experienced palace staff had been impressed. Charlotte's natural charm and genuine interest in other people made her a formidable royal presence, despite her young age. "How are the security arrangements?" Elena asked, always mindful of the challenges involved in any large-scale royal engagement. "Commander Harrison reports that everything is in place. The Metropolitan Police have established clear perimeters, and we have plainclothes officers throughout the crowd. The medical station is fully staffed, and the emergency evacuation routes have been tested twice." Elena appreciated the thoroughness of the security preparations, even though she sometimes felt overwhelmed by the constant awareness of potential threats. Royal life meant accepting that even the most joyful occasions carried risks that ordinary families never had to consider. A gentle knock at the door announced Alexander's arrival. He entered wearing the casual style of dress that had been chosen for the event, smart but approachable, designed to make him seem accessible to the families they would be meeting. His experience with public engagements showed in every detail of his appearance, from his perfectly knotted tie to his warm, genuine smile. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, settling into the chair beside Elena's dressing table. "I think so," Elena replied, though she could feel the familiar flutter of nerves that preceded any major public appearance. Charlotte seems completely confident, which is both inspiring and slightly intimidating. Alexander laughed, the sound warm and affectionate. "She's been looking forward to this for weeks. I think she sees it as her first real opportunity to make a difference in other people's lives, which is exactly the kind of motivation we want her to have about royal service." "The speech you're planning to give," Elena said hesitantly, "are you certain about including those personal elements?" Alexander's expression grew more serious. "Elena, I've spent years watching you struggle with feeling like you don't belong in this family. The public needs to understand that you're not just my wife in name, but a true partner in everything we do. Today provides the perfect opportunity to make that clear." Elena felt a familiar tightness in her chest, but this time it was anticipation rather than anxiety. Alexander's support meant everything to her, and his willingness to speak publicly about their relationship represented a level of commitment that went beyond the political necessities of royal marriage. "Your Majesty," Margaret interjected gently, "Princess Charlotte is asking if she might speak with you both before you depart." They found Charlotte in the main drawing room, looking remarkably composed for a child about to face thousands of people and dozens of cameras. She was wearing a specially designed dress in royal blue that managed to be both age-appropriate and elegantly sophisticated. Her hair had been arranged in a style that was practical for the day's activities, while still maintaining the dignity expected of a royal appearance. "I wanted to thank you both," Charlotte began, her voice clear and steady, "for helping me create exactly the kind of celebration I wanted. I think Mother would be proud of what we've accomplished together." Elena felt tears prick at her eyes. The easy way Charlotte now spoke about her mother, without the painful tension that had characterized those conversations just a few weeks ago, demonstrated how much their relationship had evolved. The child had found a way to honor her mother's memory, while also embracing the family structure that existed in the present. "We're proud of you too, Charlotte," Elena replied. "You've shown such wisdom and consideration throughout this entire process." "There's something else," Charlotte continued, reaching into a small silk purse that had been a gift from the Queen Mother. She withdrew a delicate gold locket that Elena recognized as one of Princess Victoria's most treasured possessions. "I wanted to give this to you." Elena's breath caught in her throat. The locket contained a miniature portrait of Princess Victoria on one side and a young Charlotte on the other. It had been created shortly before Victoria's death and was one of the most personal items in Charlotte's collection of her mother's belongings. "Charlotte, I can't accept this," Elena said gently. "It belongs to you, and it's far too precious to give away." "I'm not giving it away," Charlotte corrected. "I'm sharing it with someone who I want to be part of our family story." Mother would want the people she loved to be connected to each other. Alexander cleared his throat, and Elena could see that he was deeply moved by his daughter's gesture. The symbolism of Charlotte offering to share her mother's memory with her stepmother represented a level of acceptance and trust that went far beyond what Elena had ever dared to hope for. "If you're certain," Elena said softly, accepting the locket with trembling hands. "I'm certain," Charlotte replied firmly. "And I hope you'll wear it today so that Mother can be part of the celebration too." Elena fastened the locket around her neck, where it settled against her heart like a blessing. She felt a sense of completion that had been missing since she first entered the royal family. She was no longer the outsider trying to find her place. She was a full partner in honoring the past while building the future. The drive to Hyde Park was filled with excited chatter from Charlotte, who had spotted several familiar faces among the early arrivals and was eager to begin the day's activities. The park itself looked magnificent, with thousands of people already gathered despite the early hour. Families had traveled from across the country to participate in the celebration, and the atmosphere was electric with anticipation. Their first official stop was the children's activity area, where Charlotte was scheduled to participate in several games and demonstrations. Elena watched with pride as the little princess moved from group to group, engaging easily with children of all ages and backgrounds. Charlotte's natural curiosity and genuine interest in other people made her interactions feel authentic rather than forced, and the positive response from the crowd was immediate and enthusiastic. "She's remarkable," commented Lady Ashworth, one of the royal family's longtime friends who had accompanied them for the day. "I've never seen a child so young handle public attention with such grace." Elena nodded, though her attention was caught by something troubling happening near the edge of the children's area. A small group of photographers seemed to be positioning themselves in a way that would allow them to capture more invasive shots of Charlotte, potentially disrupting the relaxed atmosphere that had been so carefully cultivated. Without thinking, Elena moved swiftly toward the area, her protective instincts overriding her usual deference to security personnel. She approached the photographers with a smile that was warm but unmistakably firm. "Gentlemen," she said pleasantly, "I wonder if you might consider moving to the designated media area? Princess Charlotte is trying to enjoy her birthday celebration, and I'm sure you can appreciate the importance of allowing her some space to simply be a child." The lead photographer, a grizzled veteran of royal coverage, looked somewhat surprised by Elena's direct approach. Most royals relied on their security teams to manage media interactions, but Elena's personal intervention suggested a level of confidence and authority that hadn't been evident in her earlier public appearances. "Of course, Your Majesty," he replied respectfully. "We're just trying to get some natural shots of the princess with the other children." I understand, Elena continued, and I'm sure you'll find excellent opportunities from the official viewing areas. The point of today's celebration is to show that royal children can interact normally with their peers, which becomes difficult when they're surrounded by cameras. The photographers moved away without argument, and Elena realized that several dozen people had witnessed the exchange. Rather than appearing controlling or demanding, her intervention had demonstrated protective care for Charlotte's well-being. It was exactly the kind of authentic maternal behavior that the public respected and admired. Commander Harrison, the head of royal security, appeared at Elena's side. "Well handled, Your Majesty. Sometimes a personal approach works better than official enforcement." Elena felt a surge of confidence that had been missing from her previous public engagements. She was beginning to understand that her role as stepmother to Charlotte carried both responsibilities and opportunities that were uniquely hers. She didn't need to be Princess Victoria. She needed to be the person Charlotte needed her to be in the present moment. The morning progressed smoothly through various planned activities, with Charlotte demonstrating remarkable stamina and enthusiasm for each new group of children she met. Elena found herself relaxing into the rhythm of public engagement, discovering that her natural warmth and genuine interest in people served her well in these settings. As they approached the time for Alexander's speech, Elena noticed a shift in the crowd's energy. Word had spread that the king would be addressing not just Charlotte's birthday, but also recent speculation about the royal family's stability. The media attention intensified, and Elena could feel the weight of expectation settling over the gathering. Charlotte appeared beside her, slipping her small hand into Elena's with complete naturalness. "Are you nervous about Father's speech?" she asked quietly. "A little," Elena admitted. "It's important that people understand how much this family means to all of us." "They will," Charlotte said confidently. "Father is very good at explaining things that matter to him, and we matter to him very much." As they walked together toward the speaking platform, Elena caught sight of her reflection in the windows of a nearby refreshment stand. She was wearing the locket Charlotte had given her. Her posture was confident and relaxed, and her hand was firmly clasped with that of the little girl who had become, in every way that mattered, her daughter. The 9 words that would soon echo across the park and around the world were still unspoken, but Elena already felt the weight of their truth. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as a family united not just by duty or tradition, but by genuine love and mutual respect. Part 5, the speaking platform, had been positioned beneath a magnificent oak tree that had stood in Hyde Park for over 2 centuries, its spreading branches creating a natural canopy that seemed to embrace the gathered crowd. Thousands of faces looked up expectantly as Alexander approached the microphone, with Elena and Charlotte flanking him on either side. The autumn afternoon had grown warmer, and the golden sunlight filtering through the leaves created an almost magical atmosphere for what everyone sensed would be a significant moment. Elena could feel the collective anticipation of the crowd, the media representatives positioned strategically throughout the area, and the weight of Charlotte's small hand still clasped in hers. The events that had brought them to this moment, from the confrontation in the Rose Garden to the gradual healing of their family relationships, seemed to have led inevitably to this public declaration of unity. Alexander stepped forward, his presence commanding the instant attention of every person in the vast gathering. His voice carried easily across the park as he began to speak, warm and conversational despite the formal nature of the occasion. "Friends, families, fellow citizens," he began, his eyes sweeping across the crowd with genuine warmth. "Today we celebrate not just Princess Charlotte's 9th birthday, but something much more fundamental, the power of love to create families in all their beautiful, complicated, ever-changing forms." Elena felt her breath catch as Alexander's words reached her. This was already more personal than any royal speech she had witnessed, and she could sense the crowd's surprise and engagement with his informal, heartfelt approach. "Many of you know that our family has faced profound loss," Alexander continued, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Princess Victoria's death 5 years ago left a void that we thought could never be filled. Charlotte lost her mother. I lost my beloved wife. And our nation lost a remarkable woman who embodied the very best of royal service. Charlotte squeezed Elena's hand more tightly, and Elena could see that several people in the front rows of the crowd were wiping away tears. Alexander's willingness to speak so openly about grief and loss was unprecedented in modern royal rhetoric. But grief, we have learned, is not the end of love's story, Alexander went on. It's a chapter that teaches us how precious love truly is, and how important it is to remain open to new forms of love when they appear in our lives. Elena's heart began to race as she realized where Alexander's speech was heading. This was going far beyond anything they had discussed in their preparations, venturing into territory that would forever change the public perception of their marriage and their family. When Elena came into our lives, Alexander said, turning slightly to include her in his gaze, she didn't try to replace Victoria or erase her memory. Instead, she brought her own unique gifts, her warmth, her intelligence, her genuine care for Charlotte's well-being, and her deep commitment to the values that guide our monarchy. The crowd had grown completely silent, hanging on every word. Elena could see journalists frantically taking notes and camera operators adjusting their positions to capture every nuance of the moment. There have been recent suggestions in some quarters that our family is unstable, that the relationships between us are fragile or artificial, Alexander continued, his voice gaining strength. I want to address those suggestions directly, because the truth deserves to be spoken clearly. Elena felt a moment of panic, wondering if Alexander was about to reveal too much about their private struggles. But Charlotte's calm presence beside her provided grounding, reminding her that they had weathered their difficulties and emerged stronger. Elena is not Charlotte's stepmother by default or convenience, Alexander declared, his voice ringing across the park with unmistakable conviction. She is Charlotte's mother by choice, by commitment, and by the daily acts of love that define real motherhood. The crowd erupted in spontaneous applause, but Alexander raised his hand gently to continue. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as the weight of his public acknowledgement settled over her. Never in her wildest dreams had she imagined such a complete, unequivocal validation of her role in their family. And Charlotte, Alexander said, turning to smile at his daughter, has shown wisdom beyond her years in understanding that love multiplies rather than divides. She honors her mother's memory while embracing the love that Elena offers, proving that children often understand family better than adults do. Charlotte stepped forward slightly, her young voice carrying clearly through the excellent sound system. May I say something, Father? Alexander nodded, and Charlotte approached the microphone with the same confidence she had displayed throughout the day. Elena watched with pride and amazement as the 9-year-old prepared to address thousands of people with no apparent nervousness. I wanted to tell everyone, Charlotte began, her voice sweet but strong, that having Elena in our family doesn't make me miss my mother any less. It makes me understand how much love one person can hold in their heart. Elena loves me, and she loved my mother enough to honor her memory instead of trying to erase it. The simplicity and wisdom of Charlotte's words had a profound impact on the crowd. Elena could see people throughout the gathering nodding in recognition of the truth the child had articulated so clearly. Elena teaches me things my mother never could, Charlotte continued, because she's a different person with different gifts. And that's good, because I'm growing up into a different person than I was when I was little, and I need different kinds of love and guidance as I change. Elena felt overwhelmed by the maturity and insight of Charlotte's public testimony. The child was not only defending their family relationship, but articulating a sophisticated understanding of how families evolve and adapt over time. So when people write stories that say our family isn't real or isn't strong, Charlotte concluded, her voice taking on a note of gentle but unmistakable firmness, they're wrong. We're not the same family we were before, but we're still a real family, and we're stronger now than we were before Elena joined us." The crowd's response was immediate and overwhelming. Thousands of people rose to their feet in sustained applause, and Elena could see that many were openly weeping at the honesty and beauty of Charlotte's declaration. As the applause continued, Elena felt Alexander's arm slip around her waist while Charlotte moved to stand between them, creating a tableau of family unity that would be captured by every camera present and reproduced around the world. But more importantly, Elena felt the deep satisfaction of knowing that this moment was genuine, not performed. "There's one more thing," Alexander said as the crowd's enthusiasm gradually quieted. "Elena, would you join me at the microphone?" Elena's heart leaped with surprise, as this had definitely not been part of their planned program. She stepped forward uncertainly, acutely aware of the thousands of faces looking up at her expectantly. "Elena," Alexander said, his voice now soft enough that the microphone was necessary for the crowd to hear him. "You once asked me if I thought Victoria would have approved of our marriage. I've never answered that question publicly, but I think it's time I did." Elena felt the world around her narrow to just Alexander's face and voice, though she remained conscious of the magnitude of the moment they were sharing. Victoria's greatest wish was for Charlotte to be happy and for me to be happy, Alexander continued. She wanted Charlotte to grow up surrounded by love, wisdom, and strong examples of how to serve others. She wanted me to find companionship and partnership in the difficult work of royal service. He paused, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. Victoria would not just approve of our marriage, Elena. She would be grateful for it. She would be grateful that Charlotte has such a devoted advocate, that I have such a wise partner, and that our family has been blessed with your presence. The words Elena had longed to hear for years were being spoken not just to her, but to the world. The validation she had sought was being offered not just privately, but as a public declaration that would forever change how their relationship was understood and discussed. And that's why, Alexander continued, reaching into his jacket pocket, I wanted to do something today that I should have done years ago. Elena's confusion was evident on her face as Alexander withdrew a small velvet box. Her first wedding ring had been a magnificent family heirloom, beautiful, but chosen by royal tradition rather than personal preference. Elena Catherine Whitmore, Alexander said, his voice now carrying clearly across the silent park. Will you accept this ring as a symbol of my love for the woman you are, not just the role you've accepted? Will you be my wife not just in duty, but in joy? Elena stared at the box in amazement, understanding that Alexander was offering her something she hadn't even realized she needed, a choice. Their original marriage had been built on mutual affection and shared commitment to duty, but this moment was offering her something deeper, a marriage built on complete acceptance and celebration of who she truly was. Yes, she whispered, then, louder, yes, of course, yes. As Alexander slipped the new ring onto her finger alongside her original wedding band, the crowd erupted once again. But Elena barely heard them, focused entirely on the man who had just publicly claimed her as his true partner, and the little girl who was beaming with delight at their happiness. Charlotte stepped forward to embrace them both, and as she did, she spoke 9 words that would be quoted in newspapers around the world, 9 words that perfectly captured the transformation their family had undergone. Now we're complete, and Mother would be so proud. The simple declaration contained everything: acknowledgement of loss, celebration of new love, honor for the past, and hope for the future. It was spoken by a child, but it carried the wisdom of someone who had learned that families could be broken and rebuilt, that love could coexist with grief, and that the human heart was capable of infinite expansion when guided by grace and understanding. As the 3 of them stood together under the ancient oak tree, surrounded by thousands of people celebrating not just a birthday, but a triumph of love over loss, Elena understood that she had finally found her place not just in the royal family, but in the story of a little girl who had needed her more than either of them had initially realized. The photographs from that afternoon would become iconic, reproduced in history books and royal biographies for generations to come. But for Elena, the moment's true significance lay not in its public impact, but in the private knowledge that she had finally become exactly who she was meant to be. Charlotte's mother, Alexander's true partner, and herself, fully, authentically, and without apology. The royal guard who had overheard Charlotte's 9 words would later tell his colleagues that he had never witnessed a more perfect moment in his 20 years of palace service. Those words had indeed shaken the palace, but not with scandal or crisis. They had shaken it with the force of truth, love, and the unshakable strength of a family that had learned to honor its past while embracing its future. As the sun began to set over Hyde Park and the celebration gradually wound down, Elena knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, not as a collection of individuals bound by duty, but as a family united by choice, love, and the daily miracle of caring for one another across all the complexities that such caring entailed.